School sucks. If every time you drop your kid off he says, I don't wanna go, over and over and over again, then the message should be clear. But we keep forcing kids to go to school and suffer through this emotional abuse because education is important. And it undoubtedly is. Education is what allows us to leave the cave and see that the shadows are not reality. You saw nothing. Okay then. But somehow, along the way, we seem to have forgotten how important it is. Especially at an early age. It doesn't just give us skills that allow us to socialize and better get along with people, which can be very important, but it also teaches us basic math, reading and writing, and so much more. But it stays a bit on the surface level in a lot of places. If I could alter the school system in however way I wanted, the first thing I'd do is add a second language in the first grade. Make it a useful language like Spanish for English speakers and English for non-English speakers. And then add a tertiary language in the third grade. Here, I'd make a choice for either the parents or the students to decide what language they'd like to speak. Make it a limited choice, but a choice nonetheless. I know you might think that this is a lot to burden a child with, but studies show that language learning is much easier earlier on in life. And it can bring a lot of benefits in the way of cognitive processing and development. In Spain, for example, you start learning English in the 5th grade, and we are very well known for not being the best at the language. At that point, you're already pretty stuck in your ways, so doing it earlier is probably better. Personally, my school started us off speaking German and Spanish in kindergarten, with us formally learning the languages starting in the 1st grade. And while I hated German at the time, primarily because of how my father treated the subject, der oder das Haus. Der Haus?
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
Today, I am very grateful to have learned it, as it's a very useful language, even if I still don't know if it's der or das, or if it's in dative or the accusative. Like, what the hell is this language? We all want to be the person that is able to do something, never the person learning to do it. On top of moving the bar in terms of languages, I'd had 3 new classes. One, starting in the 1st grade, called Learning to Learn. It will last at most like 3 years and go through many different learning and teaching techniques in simple ways so you can figure out what is best for you at an early age to be able to learn things. Another, starting in the 3rd grade, called Literacy, which would focus on media literacy and digital literacy, teaching us from a pretty young age how to see through things like AI, media messages, and whatnot, so that we aren't as easy to manipulate. And yeah, it can be very good to know at an early age, because that's when we're the most susceptible. And the last one, starting from the 5th grade, would be focusing on practical skills, with each year teaching new skills while also reinforcing the ones already learned. These should come in handy later in life. In essence, it's Adulting 101 or basic survival. Over time, classes will teach you cooking so you can feed yourself, sewing so you can mend your clothes as well as make new things, and budgeting, among other things.
IRS, open up!
You'll never catch me alive! Personally, in the Swiss school system, we had a class called Werken, which apparently translates to arts and crafts, where half of the year would focus on learning woodworking and the other half sewing. I remember not being the biggest fan of this class. There was this one year where I had a broken arm. I was already a slow worker to begin with, and now I had a broken arm. I was much lower than usual, which made me fall behind a lot. As I was healing, the class would change this thing to keep my finger in place so that I could heal properly and not look funny. And the Velcro on that thing kept undoing my progress. And because of all this, the teacher almost failed me.
It is acceptable.
I was a good student. She knew me. I got good marks before. But I had a broken arm this time, which means I was much slower. A bit of understanding would be nice. So yeah, after that whole experience, I had basically written the class off as useless until, living alone, my pants got ripped. I had to sew them together. I felt so proud of myself. This skill has come in handy a few times since then, I even fixed my famous red hoodie. But adding new classes isn't going to fix all the issues with the school system. We have to tackle things in a more direct way. Teachers are criminally underpaid.
At least I can afford a cup of ramen today.
And many students suffer because of this, not getting the attention or help that they may need. This leads to many of us thinking that we are idiots, feeling like we're not good enough because we're just a bunch of fish trying to climb up trees.
Ooh, come on now, it's easy. Ooh.
This happened to my sister and myself, so we should pay them properly.
Yay! Now I can afford ramen for the whole week.
By that I mean so that they can afford more than just a few cups of ramen. So that we can entice other people to want to become teachers. Because teachers are the cornerstone of the education system and society as a whole. And there are a lot of good ones, but there are some bad ones too, so I'd up the requirements needed to teach, aligning it more with what Finland and Norway are doing. I know it's a cliche to say that, but I do believe that needing the proper education to teach is important. Essential even. In Finland, they need a master's degree in education or in their specific field, and so much more. What do you need in the rest of the world? Well, it varies from place to place, but usually a bachelor's degree and to do some courses and then get a license. Way too easy! Because of the high requirements required to teach, the teachers are trusted and not second-guessed at every turn, getting so much more authority in the way that they teach and grade. Which brings me to the heart of the problem. Grades! Now, it's true that grades communicate how well you're doing in school in a very efficient way. But as Schneider and Hutt say in their article, in order for grades to be useful as tools for systemic communication, allowing for national movement, seamless coordination, and seemingly standard communication to parents and outsiders, they have to be simple and easy to digest. Yet, that set of characteristics often conflicts with learning because the outcomes of learning are inherently complicated and messy. Consequently, while grades sometimes promote learning, they often promote an entirely separate set of behaviors. Think cheating and the like. I remember whenever I got a bad grade in a German exam, I'd hide the exam on my parents' bed before going to sleep because I would much rather hear the cliched, "I'm so disappointed," line the next morning than see him angry and shouting at me. 3 Stunden daran gearbeitet. 3 Stunden nur und du hast 45 Fehler. It made me deadly afraid of my father. I know that as students, it's meant to be our job to learn and thus get good grades. But we aren't perfect beings. There's so many classes that require vastly different knowledge and skill sets. We can't be expected to excel in all of them. Except Fred. Fred's just too good. The fact is, grades aren't important. They're just letters. They're just numbers. And I feel like these numbers discourage a love of learning that Fred and I have. Love of learning new things of history, science, or religion. Because these are such fascinating concepts and topics. How did our world come to be? What events led to where we are now? How do people interpret all of this through the lens of religion and their gods? How does language factor into all of this? Like, did you know that meat used to refer to a meal and not necessarily animal meat? That's just wild. But that love of learning is something that I developed in spite of school, not because of it. And that is because grades. Grades, in my opinion, are one of the biggest problems in education, as they are by definition arbitrary, with little flexibility. They usually don't take into account the student's situation, his strengths, his weaknesses, or anything that isn't on that piece of paper. They can impact the situation at home in negative ways, and we even let these arbitrary numbers decide our future. That's the point where I think we've made a huge mistake.
Mr. Noah, blessing us with his presence yet again. What did you do this time?
Speaking truth to power.
You're in big trouble, mister. How are you planning on passing the like and subscribe exams if you keep getting kicked out of class?
Well, I'll just watch the next video. That'll surely allow me to pass.
You know, I hadn't even considered that. I think everyone should watch that video. 10 points to House Noah.